Margaret Hayes entered her neighborhood supermarket on a quiet Tuesday morning. An employee blocked her path, claiming she was banned last week for causing trouble. Margaret insisted it wasn't her, but manager Brian Foster sided with his staff. Security escorted her out as shoppers stared. When her photo went viral days later, Brian discovered the truth that destroyed him. Margaret Hayes had been shopping at the same neighborhood supermarket for over 15 years. She knew every aisle, recognized most of the staff, and had her routine down to a science. Tuesday mornings were her favorite time to shop. The store was quiet, the shelves freshly stocked, and she could take her time selecting the freshest produce without fighting through crowds. This particular Tuesday started like any other. Margaret parked her car in her usual spot near the entrance and grabbed her reusable shopping bags from the trunk. The automatic doors slid open as she approached, and she stepped forward with her list in hand. But before she could make it past the entrance, a young employee rushed toward her. His name tag read Jake, and his face was flushed with urgency. He positioned himself directly in her path, holding up one hand. Jake informed her that she needed to leave immediately. He explained that she was the woman who had been banned from the store just last week after causing a major disturbance. Margaret's eyes widened in confusion. She shook her head firmly and insisted she had never been to the store last week. In fact, she told him she had been visiting her daughter in another state during that time. Jake wasn't convinced. He called over to another employee who was restocking nearby shelves. The second worker walked over, studied Margaret's face, and nodded in agreement. Margaret felt her heart sink as more staff members began to gather around the entrance. She tried explaining again that this was all a terrible mistake. She asked them to check their records, to look at security footage, anything that might prove her innocence. But the employees were certain they had seen her face, dealt with her attitude, and remembered the incident vividly. Within minutes, the commotion drew the attention of store manager Brian Foster. He emerged from his back office, clipboard in hand, ready to handle what he assumed was a returning troublemaker. His employees immediately briefed him on the situation, pointing at Margaret and recounting the previous week's incident in detail. Brian studied Margaret's face carefully. He prided himself on his memory, on his ability to recognize regular customers and potential problems alike. After a long pause, he made his decision. He told Margaret she needed to leave the premises immediately. The store had a zero-tolerance policy for customers who caused disturbances, and they wouldn't risk another incident. Margaret's voice cracked as she pleaded with him. She insisted this was all a misunderstanding. She had never caused any problems, never raised her voice, never done anything that would warrant being banned. But Brian remained firm. He had a business to run and employees to protect. As Brian signaled for security, Margaret felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was being treated like a criminal. Other shoppers had stopped their carts mid-aisle, watching the scene unfold. Some held up their phones, capturing the moment. The security guard approached and asked Margaret to come with him. She walked toward the exit with as much dignity as she could muster. But inside, humiliation burned through her chest. The automatic doors slid shut behind her, leaving her standing alone in the parking lot. Margaret sat in her car for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. How could they mistake her for someone else? How could Brian be so certain without even checking? She drove home in a daze, replaying the scene over and over in her mind, but the incident didn't end there. By the next morning, one of those phone videos had made its way onto social media. The image showed Margaret being escorted out of the store, her face captured in a moment of confusion and pain. The caption suggested wrongful treatment of an elderly customer, and it spread rapidly. Nobody knew Margaret's name or the full story behind what had happened, but the photo resonated with thousands of people. Comments flooded in from viewers who questioned how quickly society judges people based on appearances and assumptions. The image became something bigger than just one incident. It became a symbol of hasty judgment and false accusations. Within days, the supermarket found itself at the center of a growing controversy. Local news stations picked up the story, requesting interviews and asking for the store's side of events. Online reviews poured in, most of them negative, demanding answers and accountability. Brian watched helplessly as his store's reputation crumbled before his eyes. The corporate office called multiple times each day. They wanted explanations, damage control plans, immediate action. Brian found himself reading through hundreds of angry messages from customers who felt the store had acted without compassion or proper verification. As he scrolled through comment after comment, something began to shift inside Brian. Beyond the business consequences, beyond the negative reviews and lost revenue, he realized something fundamental. His quick judgment had caused real harm to an innocent person. He had taken the word of his employees without question, without verification, without giving Margaret any real chance to defend herself. Brian knew he couldn't undo what had happened, but he could try to make things right. He organized a public event at the store, planning to apologize directly to Margaret and set the record straight. He reached out through every available channel, posting on social media, contacting local news stations, and even having staff distribute flyers in the neighborhood. He hoped desperately that Margaret would see the messages and agree to come. Saturday morning arrived with unusually warm weather. A crowd gathered in front of the supermarket long before the scheduled time. Reporters set up cameras while curious onlookers filled the parking lot. Brian stood on a small platform near the entrance, microphone in hand, his nerves making his hands shake slightly. He scanned the crowd anxiously, wondering if Margaret would actually show up. He had rehearsed his apology dozens of times, but nothing could fully prepare him for facing the woman he had wronged. Then he saw her. Margaret appeared at the edge of the crowd, moving slowly through the gathering of people. Brian felt relief wash over him, quickly followed by renewed shame. But as Margaret drew closer, Brian noticed something that made him freeze. She wasn't alone. Walking beside Margaret was another woman who looked almost identical to her. Same height, same build, same facial features. The crowd fell silent as the two women made their way to the front. Margaret stepped up to the microphone that Brian offered her. She thanked everyone for coming and for supporting her during this difficult week. Then she explained what no one in that crowd had known. The woman who had caused the disturbance the previous week wasn't her at all. It was her twin sister Patricia, who lived on the other side of town. Margaret revealed that she and Patricia were identical twins, something that had caused mix-ups throughout their lives. But this was the first time the confusion had resulted in such public humiliation. Patricia had always been the more impulsive of the two sisters, quick to anger and prone to confrontation. Margaret, by contrast, avoided conflict whenever possible. The sisters hadn't seen each other in several months, which explained why Margaret had no idea Patricia had caused problems at this particular store. Patricia stepped forward then, standing beside her sister. She confirmed everything Margaret had said. She admitted that she had been the one who created the disturbance, who argued with employees, who ultimately got banned from the store. She apologized for the trouble her actions had caused her sister, her voice thick with regret. Brian stepped forward, his face red with embarrassment and shame. In front of the entire crowd, reporters and cameras, he apologized directly to Margaret. He admitted his failure to properly verify the situation before taking action. He announced that Margaret would receive a lifetime VIP membership to the store, along with additional compensation for the distress she had endured. The crowd applauded, though Brian knew no gesture could truly undo the damage. As the event concluded and people began to disperse, Brian stood watching the two sisters walk toward the parking lot together. They looked so similar that even now, knowing the truth, he could barely tell them apart. Brian had learned something he would never forget. Memories are fallible. What seems certain can be completely wrong. Assumptions based on appearances, on what you think you remember, can destroy an innocent person's dignity in moments. He vowed to himself that he would always verify facts, always listen to explanations, and never let certainty blind him to the possibility that he might be wrong. The store eventually recovered its reputation, but Brian carried the lesson with him every single day. And Margaret? She returned to her Tuesday morning shopping routine, though she never forgot the day when looking like someone else nearly cost her everything. What would you do if you were mistaken for someone else and no one believed your side of the story?